Hello, everyone, and welcome to Anatomy of an Adaptation. This is a podcast that aims to compare and contrast classic novels with their cinematic adaptations. I'm your host, Nicolo Grasso. Call me Nick, Nikki, whatever rocks your boat. And I'm joined today by a good friend of mine and now officially recurring guest, we can say, of the podcast, Rafael Félix. How are you doing, Rafael? How's life? How's reading going? I know you're big into reading in this period.
Yeah, life is not great. Reading is going very well. Let's put it like that. I've never felt as intellectual as I am right now because I'm at the same time reading Jean Paul Sartre and Kazuo Ishiguro at the same time. So this is like peak snobism. So I'm very good at this.
Yeah, it's part of the process. I think it's inevitable. Everyone that becomes part of this podcast in one way or another ends up reading more and more, which is nice after so many years of just non-stop movie watching. That's how I feel, at least. You know, it's been a lot of movies, and now I'm slowing down with that and just focusing more on reading. And yes, thank you so much for being here because I know this is an episode you've been looking forward to for quite a while. We discussed it, I think, even in the previous iteration of the podcast
Yes.
before I stopped it around 2023. Because today we're talking about Martin Amis's The Zone of Interest and the 2023 Jonathan Glazer adaptation. So Martin Amis, rest in peace, he passed away in 2023, was an English novelist, poet, essayist, political writer, journalist. He did it all. Very clever person, very intellectual, also very ironic, very satirical, both in the way that he presented himself and in the way that he wrote. The Zone of Interest was published in 2014. And I'm curious to know, Raphael, what did you think about this book? What is the Zone of Interest as a novel, but also in the context of the book itself?
It was an interesting experience to read the Zone of Interest because I was in a different position. I've seen the film quite a few times before I actually read the book. So the first thing that came out to me was just the shock of how different it was from the film. The book itself, the way it's structured, and the tone of it, especially the tone of it. I think that's the obvious difference in it. It's very chilling in a very different way than the film is. The book itself, the characters feel very much alive, but like almost parodies of characters themselves. I think that's very much to the interest of Martin Amis. But yeah, as shocking as the film was in a very different way, but it's a very interesting comparison that we are doing here today. These are such different beasts with such different tones, but yet the dilemmas, the morals of it, what it's trying to say are so close to each other that it's a very interesting comparison we're doing here today.
That's right. I was thinking about it. I was quickly looking back at all of the episodes that we've done of the podcast, and I think this is probably the biggest difference, the biggest drift between a book and its cinematic adaptation. Because as you mentioned, like you were a big fan of the film, you championed it when it came out. I tried to watch it, but just because of scheduling, like I never managed to be in a city where they were showing it back in early 2024, and so I kept waiting and waiting and hoping for a cinema screening. But in the meantime, I was like, well, I'm still interested in the Zone of Interest, might as well just read the book, give that a shot. And even knowing what everyone was saying about the film, I still was not surprised by just how different the novel is. For people who have not read it, essentially the not while the film, and we'll talk about that in a bit, does focus on real life people. The book, as you mentioned, is mostly fictional characters, embodiments of people who did come beforehand, which opens up amy's possibility of just, I don't know if making fun of them is the right word, but also, just having that sort of ironic detachment from them in a way that also plays into the characters. Each chapter of the book is primarily 6 chapters with an epilogue, and each chapter is split into 3 parts. The first one, the main one, is about the character of Angelus Thompson, who is a soldier who's working in this concentration camp. He starts to fall in love with the commandant's wife, Hannah Doll. Then we also follow Paul Doll, who is the actual commander of the camp. And then there is every chapter ends with a few pages about Shmuel, who was a Sonderkommando. They were imprisoned Jews who were used by the Nazis in concentration camps, generally speaking, at least, to um, kind of betray, we could say, maybe, obscure the actual goings on in the camp to make the newer arrivals feel a bit more welcomed, deceiving them, and then also helping out with some of the very, very dirty business happening inside. It's an interesting structure that I felt also helps with the rhythm of the book, because once you just start falling into it, you know what you're expecting. You know you're going to switch these perspectives. The writing style changes as well. Um, did you have any preference between these 3 characters? Did anything stand out to you?
Um, eh, as you said, they are all very different, even in both in writing and tone. Um, Angelus is maybe the earnest of them all. Let's put
Hmm.
it like that. It's the one that you feel like there's some sincerity to the character, even if we are not talking about a hero in any kind of way. I don't think it's as you said, it's like the main one. I think it's very much like a 3 piece
Hmm.
book. I think everyone is given the pretty much the exact same space. And I sometimes think that through the book you get maybe the first maybe first third of it is much more like Angelus, and then we will switch a bit more to Doll. Then we get Schmo, just this almost the same amount in every part of the book. But maybe the one that's more interesting of them all, it's Schmo. I think because it's the first of all, it's just the perspective that lacks like the irony of Martin Amis.
Hmm.
It's the one that it's the witness, as the book calls them, as were those Saunders. Um, but yes, the fact that Schmoll's character is always speaking like in thinking about what he's doing in a very human way, let's put it like that, which is something that is completely lacking in both of the other characters. Um, it's what keeps you into the book, because if it was not for that part of the narrative of Schmoll's character, I think the irony of it all, it could almost give a bitter taste to it. It could feel very misjudged in a way, but
Hmm.
I think Schmaltz's character gives a balance and a sincerity to the story that it doesn't when you're talking about a theme as dark as we are talking about here.
Yeah, it's a very thin line, right? It's a very thin line that he's balancing, but he knows what he's doing because it works. It works really well to a disturbing degree. Um, Mainly because, I mean, from Thompson's perspective, you feel it a bit, but especially when you are in the mindset of the commander, this is just his job. The way that he approaches it is just let's say a businessman in contemporary terms. It's like, he's going about his business. He has these meetings to go to. He has these events to take part in. There are some problems. There is some baggage. In this case, the problem is having to get rid of corpses, which is very cumbersome. And it's, in a way, all three of these characters kind of, the way that I saw it at least, was that they embody attempts of surviving and making sense of the situation that they're living in. Only that some are more, of course, implicit and complicit in what's happening than others. And Shmuel, especially, like you mentioned, is the most self-reflective, is the one who reckons with what he's doing and what is happening more than the others, even up until his bitter end, which we'll get to in a second. But yeah, it just keeps growing, right? The sense of unease, um, that you're also feeling from the characters themselves. There's also one passage that really stuck out to me, um, where Doll is just, he's in a room, he's in a meeting, and he's just thinking about how he could gas everyone inside, which is um, funny in the way that it's written. Even as a concept, it's humorous, but its implications are terrific and terrifying, where such acts of violence and just of understanding life and just work as having to dispose of corpses, having to dispose of people, what's the most efficient and most effective way of achieving that, um, creates such a strong alienating effect. I don't know, I'm just rambling at this point, but
Well, there is the bureaucratic way of looking at it that we follow both through Thompson and Doll, but especially Doll. But Doll is a different thing than Thompson has, because Thompson is so focused, and we should point this out. This is framed as a love story,
yeah.
which
I
is
love
the
triangle almost.
ultimate irony. Yeah, it's the ultimate irony, and maybe the biggest intrigue of the book. And we also follow like the downfall of the Nazi Empire through the book. But maybe the biggest piece of intrigue in the whole book, it's a love story, which is framed on the commander of a concentration camp. So it's the irony of it all. It's like the jokey tone of it. It's so weird. But what you get with Doll, it's a bit different, because you also get a lot of moments and passages about fanaticism,
Mhm.
about what they actually believe what is National Socialism, and their way of looking at it. Um, there is a point where one of the characters says that Germany can't lose because their blood doesn't allow them to. So it's independently of what it's happening in Russia. Um, they will in the end always triumph, and there's a lot of different characters that go through the book, because there's a lot of characters going on. Sometimes that's almost to a fault
Mhm.
with the book is very hard to follow at some points, because there's a lot of names, there's a lot happening, and Martin Amis is sometimes even wanting you to like have some background on this at some point, because although the characters themselves are fictional, they're living in a very real place, and the people they're talking about, like Himmler and Heinrich, are all real people.
Mhm.
um, so it sometimes gets a bit hard to follow on that sense, but the amount of conversation, especially on the doll characters, and even in some discussions he has with Hannah about fanaticism, what they're doing, and all that, they're very much food for thought on those moments.
And that's, I think, is one of the key reasons why I think this book is very unique compared to most Holocaust, World War II media. Um, is that, again, like I mentioned before, this is not a book that came out during, let's say, the heyday of Holocaust memorials, like the 50th anniversary in the 90s. But this came out in 2014. And despite being a book that's so specific to, of course, 1940s, elements of it, like the ones that you were mentioning, also apply to the contemporary world we're living in. We are 11 years apart from when the book came out at the time of recording, and just the way that people can fall into such violent ideologies and just believing them full heartedly um, is disturbing because we're seeing that once again, especially when it comes to straight up Nazism, fascism. I never thought growing up that it we would end up like this. I don't know how it was for you, but it always seemed so distant to me. You know, it's something you read in the books. They tell you you learn history not to repeat those mistakes. You learn how these things happened. Just the general unease of the people, the charismatic leaders. They tell you what you want to hear. It's just a slow descent into violence, into genocide, into oppression of other people. And we are once again falling right it. We're not falling. We are
We
in
are in
it,
it. Yeah, at
o-
this point, we are very
objectively,
much in it. Yeah.
knee deep in shit. You
Mm.
could say almost drowning at this point. Um, how did you feel? How do you feel about this? This ties to the world we're living in right now, or even like pre-Trump, because at this point, 2014, um, the American elections were just starting to ramp up for the year to come. So,
It's interesting because the book came out in 2014 before the rise of populism in Europe, like
mhm.
this new wave of populism that came mostly after the 28 08 sorry crisis, economic crisis. Everything is very much following their own path as history has taught us that we've been here before. Um, I see. Maybe it's the even the tone of the book. I see more political implications in the film that I see in the book. However, the book with in those moments I was talking about the moments where they discussed national socialism, and we are talking about a moment in time, at least in the book sense, where everything felt like it was going wrong, and you have a lot of characters trying to convince themselves they're gonna actually conquer Russia or the Soviet Union back then, where they're talking about new operations again, like the optimism of we'll get there at some point, and those kinds of things kind of bleed into what we're talking about today, but in reverse, let's put it like that, because everything is going very, very poorly at this point for us. The world, as you said, is pretty much knee deep into shit. It's not looking particularly great, not only in the US, but Europe is not looking great for the last 10, 15 years with the rise of far right and extremism and populism and all that. So we are here recording a podcast and we are living our lives, and but everything around us is completely going to shit, and we are sometimes still trying to think that everything might be okay in the end, even though everything proves us that it's going very well. So in a way, we might be actual fanatics in a way because we believe in a normal society.
Very delusional.
Yes, we're very delusional. But yeah, I think the zone of interest kind of makes us, the book at least, makes us look into what we are doing today, and you should all be very, very worried. Yes, very, very worried.
We should. We should. And the last thing I wanted to ask you about the book before we transition fully into the film is how did you feel about the ending? Because we get to the final chapter of the book and there's this big time jump. I would usually save this for the end of the full conversation, but since the two, like the book and the film, are so different, I think it's interesting to talk about it now. That you know there's this whole confrontation that happens between Anna is trying to get together with Thompson, and the husband all is found out. There's this whole thing. He hires Shmuel to go kill her. Shmuel has a change of heart, kind of like he just, I don't know how to say it, like he just reckons and fully accepts
His fate.
his fate. Yes. And then you know we know what happens with the end of the war. Thompson tries to be with Hannah one last time, but when he finds her, she has made a new life for herself, a new life that she really likes, that she loves. She's thankful also to Thompson for his affection towards her. It's what she needed to feel a bit normal inside the concentration camp during that period of her life. And now she's like, I'm done. Like seeing you, being with you would be a reminder of everything bad that actually happened, of the worst time. So yeah, this is not gonna happen, and he has to live by himself completely alone. Um Again, like the fact that everything is framed through this love triangle, through
Yeah.
this romance, is very interesting, considering the fate of many Germans who assisted the Allies to try and get um, pardons and the like, which is what happens with Thompson, but
Thompson.
also of the Germans who were convicted at Nuremberg and other trials. So, how did you feel about this ending? Because I read online, I was going through some reviews just to get a general perception of what people thought,
Mhm.
and quite a few times on Goodreads, which is not the
Not the
best
best.
source.
Yes.
Professional critics really like the book, love the book. There's a very good article by Joyce Carol Oates about it. But yes, I've read people say that they didn't either get the ending or they thought it was anticlimactic. How did you feel about it?
The anticlimactic, I can understand
Hmm.
to the degree, but a lot of the book and Schmaltz's chapters were and Doll's, because there's a lot of moments where Doll and Schmoll just kind of intertwine paths,
Yeah.
because Doll is like the direct commander of Sonder, the Saunders and Schmoll, but there's a lot of conversations, but they are mostly on those chapters, weirdly enough, about why does Schmoll not die? Why do they do that? And there's a point where Schmoll says, because we still hope, sir. And the book itself and the Saunders are framed like people that are just trying to survive, as you put it. But Dole said itself, you know the end of this. You will die in the end of this. It will maybe depend on when and how, but you will die after this. So Schmoll is always trying to understand why does he do what he does, and why does he just doesn't stop doing it and accept his fate. And I think in the end is like the final moment where Schmoll actually has a moment to reflect and think, yes, I'm going to take the fate on my own hands. This is the way that I don't let my life just be dolls.
Hmm.
So on the direct order, he just doesn't follow it and kills himself or offs himself. Let's put it like that, maybe. Um, and he was doing that by threat of his wife and all that.
Yeah.
So everything around him is being thrown at him. Is a prisoner not only in the concentration camp itself, but in his mind as well, because he's working for them. But the moment where he actually just offs himself, kind of gives him some sense of agency for maybe the first time in the book, where he describes what he's doing every day, what he has to do. There's a lot of talk about how we are going to get these Jews to the to the camps and to the furnaces, to the chambers. There's a whole like a performative side of the talks, which it's very weird. So when Schmoll actually does that, he picks himself the first time in the book and says, "Okay, this is my life. I might finish it, but you won't do it for me." And I think the ending, framed again on the love story, is kind of makes a lot of sense, since the book is also framed on a love story. We can never just say this enough. The book is it has a lot of things in it, but it's 100% framed on a love story.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is very, very different from how the film is. the 2014, 2023 slash 24 Jonathan Glazer adaptation, which again, unsurprisingly from Glazer, he's the director of Birth, of Sexy Beast, of Under the Skin. He takes his time making movies, not so much by choice, but just by how complex the projects themselves are, but also just getting financing for them because he is bold in ways that very few filmmakers from English speaking countries truly are. We can even throw out this word that's absolutely overused, but very much fitting with him. He's a visionary.
Yes.
If you've seen, dear listeners, any of his movies outside of the zone of interest, you know that they're all quite unique, quite hard to describe, quite unlike anything you've seen before or since. I think probably Sexy Beast is the closest to a movie you've seen before, kind of like a full Guy Ritchie type crime thriller. But even then, he finds a way to make it his own. But the zone of interest is something that he wanted to make ever since he read the book. 2014, he heard of it, he read it, he loved it, and he fought to make it. It took a long, long time. They finally shot it. Despite COVID, they managed to end up shooting it in 2021 during a long period of time, shot in a very unique way. We talked about the book. It's framed as a love story. It's all these different characters intertwined with what's happening in the concentration camp. With the film, Glazer takes the story of Doll, the commander of the camp, and actually turns him into the actual commander of Auschwitz, Rudolf Hoss, and its wife, his family with children, who were living right at the outskirts of the camp, right outside the walls of Auschwitz. Um, Raphael, what are your thoughts on Jonathan Glazer's The Zone of Interest?
Yeah, I've seen this film quite a few times at this point. And when I saw it the first time, I was it was a very weird experience for me because I sat there for like the whole credits and a couple of minutes later, just kind of trying to like settle down a bit. The
Mhm,
film is very oppressive. It's uncomfortable. It's not like the book in almost any way. When I've read the book and we've talked about like some comparisons of it, I think that Glazer worked on this for so long that it kind of became its own thing. So even calling it, I think even going to the degree where he said that, and the film is made with that sense that it's based on this novel. It's I don't think it's true anymore to a degree. I think you could see the film and have absolutely no way. If they had different names, you could completely think they are two completely different things. Because I think Glazer just turned it into its own thing, not only characters but tone, the narrative itself, if we can call it that. So, yeah, it's a completely different beast. It's very, as you said, you use the word visionary, and I think that it picked up a theme that has been used. Maybe it's the most recreated moment of history of the Second World War, and he did something with it that I haven't seen before. We've seen things that also talk about the apathy of it, and I'm
mhm.
pretty sure we will talk about that. But the artistry that was put into this, the way it's made, the way it's shot, the way it frames the story, I think it's so different from anything we've seen before on this moment in time and this period, even cinema itself. Some things I think it's a complete masterpiece. We throw this word around when we know it almost like a meme at this point, but I truly think it's one of the most important and daring films I've ever seen.
It's a strong statement, and it's one that I have to agree with, which makes me
God,
so
I
happy.
didn't know what you thought about the film until this point.
It's like, oh my god, he hated it. It is one of those cases where the anticipation was so strong that I wanted the experience to be as pure as possible. Because I remember it came out online, and I was like, "Am I really going to watch the Zone of Interest on like a shitty laptop?" So I said, "No, I'm gonna wait for the cinema." But alas, that never came. But they managed to recreate that experience. Like got some good headphones with Dolby Atmos, black screen, 4K version of the movie, everything in the dark around me. And I was gripped. I was disturbed in a way that I was not anticipating, despite everything that I had read about it. We talked about it at length as well, off mic, of course. Um, what really surprised me, there's many things that surprised me, to be honest. Outside of the more obvious parts, which are, the quality of the sound design, the richness to it, um, the way that it's shot and framed almost as a documentary, which I found very interesting. Um, but what really surprised me is that there's more humanity to this than I expected, than I've even read. And it's retroactively made some of the criticisms that I've read over the past year and a half even worse, from certain critics, certain film goers. But we'll talk about that later. Just the reception of this film, very thorny reception, we can say. But just as general thoughts, I completely agree with what you were saying as well. That this is very much its own beast. Um, if it were called anything else, like you said, it could stand on its own, which I think is one of the beauties of the adaptation work that Glazer did. I do wonder if it is indeed one of those things where it's just been time, where it just grew more, just delve deeper into this story, into these characters, but also the way that he brings to life this world. You know, it's impressive. They actually shot near the real location, renovating an old house. They actually had the actors embody these characters for long and long takes because they basically had these cameras running for 10, 15 minutes at a time and just had the actors move around, which was from listening to some of their interviews, both challenging at first and also incredibly freeing later on, because I didn't always have to worry about whether it's a wide shot or it's a close up. It's like, doesn't matter. I'll just give the performance. I'll just fully live into this character. Which, especially the two protagonists, we have to mention them: Christian Friedel, who plays Rudolf Hoss, and of course Sandra Hüller, who plays the wife, Edwig. Both of them are so great in this, so chilling in a way that is unlike any other portrayal of Nazis. That's something that especially Sandra talked about very, very frequently. Is that she's German, and everyone loves to have Germans play Nazis. I love my boy August Diel, but poor guy's played him so many times, so many times at this point. It's a cliche, um, but it speaks to the quality of Glazer's direction and confidence that she ended up taking this role, and Christian Friedel as well. Um, Playing Hoss and playing someone who's so, and the term is being used to death, but so banal in his just day-to-day life running a concentration camp. How did you feel about these characters, their performances, the way they just live in this world?
I think most of the a lot of the reception about around this film was about how cold it felt and how detached it felt. But I think that's it comes from two different places. It comes from like there's almost a conflict between what the characters are doing and how the film is framed, which I think it's the visionary side of it is that, as you said, there's such banality to this. It's just everyday life. The first time we see Hoss, I think it's the first time. is when it's his birthday and he's being presented with a boat. And he's picking up the children and is putting the children inside of the boat. And it's such a beautiful family moment if it was not for the concentration camp just outside it. That's I think the coolness comes from it because the characters itself feel like they're actually a family. They're discussing family things, even if they are the most disturbing things. Like, please bring chocolates that the Jews bring and they take out before they get into the chamber and stuff like that. So the family life of it, the family drama of it, it feels real. It feels like a real family. It's not dramatized intensely. Like you could see this version of this film made in Hollywood. It would be very
Oh
different,
God.
but it would be very dramatized as a family. Here it's not. It wins because it's very. I think you'll use the perfect word for this. So I use it again. It's very banal. It's very everyday life. We are running around. We are just getting out the lights. We're just cooking something, eating. We're talking in different beds. We are just showing stuff to the children. The children are playing in the garden. It's just that. And I think even Hoss itself uh, is, as you said, banal. It just feels like a everyday man, a everyday businessman. And Sandra Hüller is extraordinary in this film, mostly because of her physical portrayal of this woman. She's very rigid. She does feel like someone, and you get this from like a conversation she has with her mother
Mm.
when they're talking about the Jewish lady to which the mother of Sandra Hüller's character cleaned her house. So you know that they come from a very low income, very low class kind of life,
Mm.
and due to Nazism and fascism, they just climb the social ladder. You can still see in the way she walks is very heavy. It's not super graceful in any way. She always feels like she's out of place in that house, that very luxurious to put it like that on those
Mm.
times house. So the way she embodies that character is absolutely like hypnotic to a degree. She makes you delve into the world and tells you a lot about that character just by the physical stance of her, not only the way she talks. So yeah, I think those two characters. I think Christian's performance was very neglected in the film itself. I don't think people talked enough about it, mostly because of everything that was around it. But
Mhm.
I think both of them were extraordinary in this.
Yeah, especially like the way that she quickly loses her temper
Mhm.
throughout the film. She's like trying to maintain
Yeah.
that composure, but it always comes out in almost every moment whenever something doesn't go the way that she wants it to. But yeah, just an impressive cat, and also the fact that this is a British production shot in Germany in German. It did end up winning Best Foreign Film for the UK, which is Best Foreign
Interesting.
Language Film, which is interesting. 2023 was a weird year for that because you also had for Japan you had the Wim Wenders film, Perfect Days, and just all those things. But um, that was an interesting. Let's just even talk about that now that I've mentioned it. Just the reception of the film. You know, the movie came out in May 2023. People loved it. You know, won Grand Prix or like the second place basically in Cannes. Started getting great recognition around the world. Then, as most people listening probably know, something called October 7th happened in 2023. The conflict between Israel and Palestine escalated in a way that was straight up an attack on Gaza and the people in Palestine. Um, and when good Jonathan Glazer won the Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film, he delivered a speech that was, I don't even want to say misinterpreted, but just, certain people listened to it wanting to see something that was not present. They saw an attack when he was calling for peace, when he was calling for acceptance, and when he also made something very, very clear that as much as the movie is about the Holocaust, and of course the plight of the Jewish community and the Jewish people during World War II, and even beforehand, it is not exclusively about that, but it also embodies so many other ongoing conflicts, but he also directly tied it to what was happening and still is happening at the time of recording in Israel and Palestine. Um, and I think we were talking about it just before, we were talking about, yeah, we're just two guys recording a podcast when the world is falling apart. What else can you do? You just accept it and move on. There's not much you can do. And what you see in the film of the zone of interest is people who could be doing something about what's happening and just don't. They're actually actively perpetuating
Yes,
what's
exactly.
happening, but just don't show it to me. There's this nice little wall, well, little wall, this nice big wall that's keeping all of the horrors contained inside. There's this very annoying siren that's always running so that you don't hear all of the screams, you don't hear the gunfire, you don't hear um, all of the violence and the horror that's happening. And that's fine. Like you were saying, just, play with the kids, tend to the garden, have a nice party, scold the dogs being a bit naughty, eating the food, the leftovers, all those things. But even they cannot escape this facade. There's one moment that I found particularly disturbing when Rudolph is with his children, like, let's just go with the boat, play a bit
Yes.
up along the river, and just you see the ashes and human remains just like coming slowly into frame. And when you realize he's just like running, he's scared. It's his fault. Like he's trying to pretend everything is fine when he's directly witnessing how even his pitiful life is impacted by what he's doing. Um, I guess I just threw a lot at you at this point. But I do believe that the way that the movie is shot and the way that he presents these characters directly ties not just to what was happening in 1942, 44, but also it's still happening nowadays. Like we can talk about Gaza and Palestine and Israel all we want, but it's also not the only cases of internment camps with people just like merrily living outside them. I mean, it's been kind of forgotten now, but when they were shooting that waste of money that was Mulan in China, they were filming very, very close to internment camps
Yes.
back there. So the floor is yours if you have any. I don't even have a question. It's just concepts, ideas, things that are happening.
I think Glazer, when it came time to actually give that speech, um, you knew that he was very scared of doing it. He was trembling all over that speech. And let's put it like this: Jonathan Glazer is not a guy who can get money for his films very easily.
God, no.
He cannot do films in a very easy way. So what he was doing was, this is very much one person that is putting up his livelihood at stake at that moment. Accepting an award, yes, of course it is, and it's a very privileged place to do it. However, he's not a rich filmmaker in that sense. He's not a star in any kind of world. So he was pretty much almost antagonizing to a degree uh, the money he could get for future projects and all that with that speech. So he was actually putting his money where his mouth was. He was a person that could actually lose his livelihood. And if we're talking about filmmakers, it's not only livelihood, it's like what actually moves them, what drives them. It's not a profession where you get into if you just do your day job, even though like the Russos really want us to believe that. Um, the fact is, he was so brave in that moment. It was very endearing to see. And yeah, I think the connection. I think also felt impelled to do it because there was a lot of ties to the zone of interest between like the October 7th and the whole conversation that happened after that. Like the anti-Semitic movement was kind of picking up the film as well, trying to make it its own thing. And all.
Yep.
We've seen this with other films. The Brutalist is another example of this. Another film that it's absolutely not about that in that sense. But I think it felt impelled to do it, especially because the when we're talking about today's situation in Gaza, it's not different from what we've seen in the film, in the sense that everything is happening outside of a wall. Gaza is pretty much the open air prison, as we can put it. Okay? Even the October 7th thing was happened in a music festival that was happening just outside the border, like not the border, the wall itself. So it was very much like the the prisoners on Auschwitz camp just coming into the beautiful garden that this family is attending to. So I think Jonathan Glazer felt impelled to do it because the ties to it are so once a kind of ironic to a degree and very sad to it. So I think this film is masterful, but I will always like feel a very big degree of admiration towards Glazer for actually getting itself out there and just say what he said at that moment. And he did it again, by the way. He did it again just a few weeks ago on not himself, but the speech that was written from him on the Caesars when he won the award.
Oh, I missed
For
that actually.
yes,
Okay.
yes, there was another speech. He was not there, but the guy was there, read his speech, and once again he was calling for peace and justice in Gaza. So yeah, that was about the reception of the film. I think once again we'll be talking about the reception a little bit on this because once again what we're talking about is the coldness of it. Everyone
Hmm.
was so detached. I have a very close friend of mine who said that a thing like this should not be portrayed as coldly, as because it felt like it was. She felt like it was like almost I don't want to use the word lighthearted, but it was not like as violent as she expected, which I think the film is it's almost a horror movie in a sense.
Yes.
I think everything in the film is informing you of that. I think the way it's shot, the very static camera, and not only that, the height of the camera. It's felt you can feel that most times the film you can sense that you are just sitting in a chair on the corner of the room, just looking at it. You are very on waist level kind of camera, so you are a very passive, like these characters, a very passive viewer of this. But then you have, I think that is the moment where the film starts to elevate a little bit. Is that scene where you go from like room to room, where the daughters can sleep, the maid is trying to quiet the baby and she's drinking,
Oh God, yeah.
just to like almost quieten the noise. And it's on that moment where the grandmother, the Edwig's mom, just opens up the window and like her face just it gets bright orange, so you don't see the chimney itself, but you see her face in the dark just being lit up by the flames that are coming out of the chambers. And the next morning she leaves. So the film in that sequence itself, I think it turns very humane in that sense where this what is happening is it's on maybe not you're not looking at it, but not only are characters out, you can hear pretty much everything.
Hmm.
You can hear screams, you can hear the flames, you can hear the gunshots, you can hear everything. And there's a lot of scenes where I think the framing of this film is just insane. There, especially in the first part of it, there's a lot of scenes where Hoss itself himself goes like to the garden. There's a very specific shot where it's framed just below the shower, the like outside,
Mm.
and the chimney is just it just fuming on his back, and he's that phrase just tells you a story on that specific moment. So I think the way people looked at this film was very. I don't want to be. I want to say that people didn't give the film the chance, or like didn't give them enough thought, or maybe they don't trust Glazer's way of looking at it. Maybe it's me that I know what he does. I
Hmm.
know his films, and I know what he usually does and his approach. So I give him like the room to surprise me and do things differently. And maybe other people who maybe do not have the same um, positive look at or look at all at Glazer maybe didn't give it the chance, or maybe they're perceiving it in a more nefarious way than it is.
Hmm.
I don't think the film is very cruel, but I don't think the way it's made itself or the way it's presenting itself is it features cruelty, but it's not cruel, and it's trying to make a statement in a way. Let's put it like that, but it's not beating you up in the head. It just makes you look.
Yeah,
I
I,
rambled a little bit. I'm
no, no,
sorry.
no, 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 no. Don't apologize. No, no. I agree with what you're saying, and like I think there's two movies that I think do what people, maybe some people, of course, wanted or expected from the Zone of Interest, that do it so poorly, in my opinion. Uh, One of them, like the mainstream, I don't know if I think it's like a British production, not Hollywood, but like let's say a mainstream Hollywood production, is The Boy with the Striped Pajamas.
Oh god, I've read the book. It's
I've done both.
oh
I don't know if I had to read it when I was little, but for sure, like I read it when I was like 12,
yeah,
11, 12, and I watched the movie as well. I think we watched it in class for that's very popular here in Italy. Of course.
yeah. It's good.
Good. Whenever it's Memorial Day at the end of January, they usually tend to do either in class or in like in big auditoriums in schools, they show movies about the Holocaust. And one year they showed The Boy with the Striped Pajamas, which I'd already seen, but I think that's giving people the sappy Hollywood version, even worse. And I really love Schindler's List. I haven't seen it in like 7 years at this point, but The Boy with the Striped Pajamas is the dangerous portrayal of the Holocaust. Just glossy, overly romanticized, simplifying everything to a disturbing degree. And another thing, because when you were saying like cruelty, um, cruel filmmaking, instantly the image of Son of
Son of
Saul
Saul.
came into mind.
I was thinking the same thing.
A movie that I, similarly to The Zone of Interest, I waited years to watch Son of Saul. And when I did, I was like, I don't get why people love this film. And to be fair, I don't think it has had the legacy or impact that most of its fans would have hoped for, probably, because I barely see it mentioned anymore. So some would say for good reason. I would say for good reason, considering also the director's work ethics or lack thereof.
Or luck
Um,
thereof.
but also just the filmmaking is the complete opposite of ironically, it's the complete opposite of the Zone of Interest, because it's all extreme close-ups focusing on this protagonist just going around the camp, atrocities happening all around him, and he wants to make it so personal that it felt incredibly cold to me and
Yes,
detached.
that is the thing.
Well, Zone of Interest is the complete
Exactly.
opposite.
Exactly.
um
Also, let's put it. Let me just. It's a very interesting thing because they won the same prize in Cannes.
they did really.
Yeah, I think
Damn.
because Son of Soul won grand prize of the jury, and I'm looking at this moment, and I'm pretty sure that that is the award that Zone of Interest got.
Probably is okay. I thought it was Golden Palm. Okay, okay, even better then. Very ironic. And released almost a decade apart, because I think it was 2015, right?
It's 2015, yeah, exactly.
2015. So it's interesting how just times change, but it goes also to just how some people, because I was rereading some old reviews on Letterboxd of of certain reviews, and there is so much style in a seemingly styleless film. It never feels like uh, things are just happening and that's it. From the very beginning up until the very end, you have constant reminders of what's happening with simple fade outs. There are, I want to say, like maybe 3 to 4 instances throughout the movie when we're just focusing either on details of flowers or on the bright sun, and just the screen turns to pure color, whether it's black, pitch black darkness, pure white, red, um, and you are just drowned by what's happening inside the camp, to the point that I find it so hard compared to other movies where I can see why people can intellectualize what's happening but not feel anything. The way you put it was perfect. It feels like a horror movie. There's so much anticipation as well of danger throughout that I was not expecting. There's a moment when Hoss is in his office and he has a woman who's probably a prisoner,
Mhm.
prostitute. Is she Jewish? Is she Polish? Doesn't matter. You can imagine what it does to her, but it's never shown. But you do see the aftermath, which is him
Yes.
just like walking through this narrow corridors to go into a basement to wash himself off. Eh, just not knowing, again, like they always say that in horror what you don't see is scarier than what you do see. Your imagination runs wild, and there's so much that you don't see here, which is incredibly upsetting. But there's also one thing that we haven't mentioned yet, which is, I don't remember the actual name in the end credits, but the Anna character, I think that was her real life
Yes.
name, the glowing girl, we can describe her.
The negative.
um the because I was looking into it, because I thought, is this just like inverted footage or something? And it's actually shot with infrared cameras, which is once again brilliant. A brilliance that came out of necessity. There is a couple of parts in the film where we just see, as Oz is reading the Ansel and Gretel story to his daughter, we just see this girl completely just glowing white in pitch black darkness, leaving apples and some food to um, on the path that the prisoners will work on, will walk through outside of the camp. And it is revealed, and in a way that honestly, like to me, it felt like a twist. I was like, "Who is this girl? Who's this girl? Oh shit, she's the one who's working inside the house. She's part of. No, she's not part of the family, but she's one of the Polish girls
Is
uh,
she?
who was hired. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because there's one
Oh, I
point
actually didn't notice that it was the same girl.
because there's the part where she is outside and she finds like a little
Yeah,
medallion locket thingy where
yeah, we need to talk about it.
it has the piano sheet inside of it, and then we're just following her as she goes back home, and you have this shot reverse shot where you have Sandra Hüller like going to open the door,
Mm-hmm.
and it's letting her in, and the contrast between the, let's say, normal standard visuals with this infrared camera, which, just to kind of end this the technical aspect, was done because they just didn't have lights. They're just like, we need to shoot this scene, but in pitch black darkness, how can we get her present in the frame without it looking like a Hollywood production, without it feeling too disjointed by what happened before? Only logical solution was, let's use a thermal infrared camera where her literal warmth will make her glow, will bring light into the scene, which we can look at it thematically, like she's the only bright spot into the narrative. It looks gorgeous, especially because everything else is so flat in like the technical sense. And it's something that I thought watching it, and I read that that's actually what they did. They barely color graded the footage.
Yeah,
It's almost straight out of the camera. Just this flat log
very
footage.
gray,
Very gray, very,
very
there's
white.
not strong shadows, there's
Yeah.
not bright lights, warm colors. Um, So yeah, sorry, no, I was rambling a bit about her, but this entire section um was so moving. Also because of just the droning sounds that are employed. I have a
Yeah.
soft spot for drones.
Mika Levy's soundtrack in this, it's very sparse.
Hmm?
Just comes up here and there, but when it comes, Jesus, the film is mostly sound design.
Yeah.
The sound design of it is, as you mentioned in the beginning of this conversation, is astonishing, it's harrowing. Even when you get to the credits, the whole like chorus of voices
Oh my
and
god.
screams, they are so unnerving. But Mika Levy's when her score just comes up in just touching moments, it's very almost scary to a degree because of the yes, what you said is completely true. I think that is the reading that I take from it. It's like it's the only pitch of hope in this whole film is those moments where it's actually the sense that it's inverted makes like literal sense to a degree. Um, so it's the most beautiful moments in the film. Let's put it like that. And I think it ends up being the most beautiful moment in the film when she's actually playing the piano and the
Yes.
notes. And I I remember especially because the first time you see this film, you're trying to process everything that is happening. It's a different presentation that you're used to. So I've seen the film 4 times. I didn't even notice that it was a single. So
Mm.
inverted shot of her in Doll's not Doll's house, it's interesting. But the moment where she's just picking up a piano and they're trying to close the windows because the smell is getting there. And
The dust is covering all of
yeah,
the ash is covering the
and every time
clothes.
she comes outside, it gets the infrared uh, cameras again. When she gets inside, we are back into normal color.
Mhm.
But when she was just playing the piano and the lyrics of the song, they're not sang; they just appear on the screen. It's the second time I watched the film. I remember being in the theater and just sobbing my face off in that scene. So yeah, it's a beautiful, like I wouldn't say positive, but hopeful
Hopeful.
thing of the film. I think even Glazer just put it there just to give it some balance because maybe and it's not a long film by any shot. It's 144, but it's so relentlessly brutal that those moments kind of, especially when it, because I think that is the last time you've seen that family is when she's playing the piano, and I think that just that specific moment itself just gives a completely different view of the film. It's not nihilistic. It's not. There's a lot of talk about like the banality of evil. That's been very much what Bisvin said about the zone of interest, and I can see it to a point. I think there is definitely something to be said on that sense, but I don't think it's all that. I don't think it's just blatant apathy and cruelty in the zone of interest. I think there is definitely a critique, if you can put it like that, because it is what it is. But even the hopefulness, even in a very very small way, the hopefulness of it, it's there just shining just in the corner, especially when we get to talk about the ending. I think there's another way to talk to frame this whole thing.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, and even that hopefulness. At first, I was hoping, expecting to maybe find it a little bit in the children of Hoss, but all of them are like
This is the white ribbon part of the
God,
film.
good lord. You have the daughter who's a somnambulist who's completely detached from everything that's happening. You have the of course the infant baby is infant, thank God. Just can't do anything bad yet. The younger child, the younger son, is trying to like shut it off completely. There's one point where he hears and sees a little bit of an execution that's about to happen, He's just like, no, 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 no. I'm not looking at this. I'm not hearing this. I'm not listening, pretending it's all fine. Don't do it again. Don't do it again. Probably something that he's learned as well. When his parents do wrong, you don't do it again, okay? Because you get shot. Um, but most disturbingly, you have the eldest son, who is straight up just a part of the Hitler Youth, uh, fooling around with a girl in the backyard at one point, and then straight up just uh, imprisoning his brother in the garden shed as a complete power move.
Laughing even.
Laughing, yes, gleeful evil. Um, it's always one of those things. You mentioned the White Ribbon. I managed to watch it just in time for this conversation because it's a movie I've been meaning to watch for many years. And the way that children pick up the flaws of the adults, not even just the flaws, but just the way that they are brought up, ends up influencing how they go through life, and um, socializing and communicating with other people and taking a place in society. You see how just this kid, this teenager, I think is probably like what, 12, maybe 13. It doesn't look older than that. Um, can become radicalized and just evil, just straight up evil. There's no true redeeming qualities to any of the family members, except for maybe the youngest ones, because they're maybe too young to yet process what's happening. Um, but this does lead us into the ending of the film. I don't know if you want to describe it, maybe, which is quite different, of course, from the novel, even though in a way they both kind of arrive at a similar conclusion from different routes.
I
But
want to hear you talk about that actually.
oh, now? No, no, you go
Yeah.
first.
Okay. Okay. So there were in the later parts of the film, Hoss's character is so good in Auschwitz that he's being transferred to another camp.
Promotion.
So he's got a promotion. So he's going to develop a concentration camp that is not getting very up to the numbers that it should get. So we are presented with some very, very, very bureaucratic and boring and terrifying meetings between officers of the SS, trying to understand the logistics of how are we going to get even more people killed. It's the Hungarian project, which we know came in the later stages of the Nazi Empire. But yeah, during those final like 15 minutes, let's put it like that, we see Hoss, and it's something that I want to hear you talk about because it's the one thing in the film that I still haven't catch up super well. It starts to get slightly sick. He
Mhm.
goes to the doctor. Something is wrong with him, but the doctor doesn't particularly find anything. Um, we also have, and you talked about this in the book, and I wanted to talk about that before, but I waited for this moment. It's the only sequence or the only moments that directly migrated from the book to the film, which is the moment where, and
Uh,
it's the one moment in the film where the camera actually feels very different from the other parts of the film. If we don't talk about the infrared moments, but it's when Hoss is looking at a party and he's talking to Edwig on the phone, and he says, "I was just thinking about how I would guess this many people in this room. It could be very hard because the ceiling is very high, but I think it would make it good or something." It's a moment that I wanted to bring up. But yeah, in the end of the film, Hoss knows that he's being transferred back to Auschwitz, and in the building where he usually works, he just is going down the stairs, pukes twice, or it actually just it's the motion of puking, not actually. So he feels
nothing
sick.
comes out.
So he just feels sick. So it's maybe there's something to it. He feels sick, and then he's going down some flights of stairs, and he gets to one of the floors, and the end of the floor is pitch black, and you were not looking at him very close. You're looking at him like from like a distance on the other side of the corridor,
Yeah.
and you see him almost like looking directly at the camera. So, but it's very far away, so you can understand it. And then the film cuts to modern day. Um, I don't know which concentration camp that those footage
I
are
think it's
from.
Auschwitz,
It's
actually.
Auschwitz, where you see the cleaning workers, just modern day cleaning workers, just cleaning up the concentration camps, the like the insides of the chambers, actually, just sweeping, just tying up the glass where the shoes are exposed from the Jews that were in Auschwitz when the Allied troops got there. You are presented with images of the museum itself, with like the crutches, the outfits.
Mhm.
There's the final moment in that sequence is a corridor where a lady is just vacuum cleaning the corridor, which is full of pictures from that Jewish people that died. Not only Jewish, most likely, but everyone that died on that, or that they know they died on the concentration camp in Auschwitz. And then it gets back to Hoss, just still looking at the camera, like Glazer almost like open a vortex between like time in a way. So it's almost like Hoss looking at the future, what is happening, that simplest where he's going next. And then you just see him leave the building, and it cuts to black. It doesn't show the credits at that moment. You still have like 3 to 4 minutes of just sounds,
The
screams.
most harrowing
Yeah,
track.
yeah.
Um,
The whole credits soundtrack is daunting, as it should. So yeah, it's as you said. I wanted to understand what you feel about the ending because you compared it to the book in a way, since that they get to different places. And I'm interested to see you talk about that.
well, I like that Glazer doesn't make it clear whether Hoss is actually, of course, the fictional Hoss, whether he's actually witnessing this or not. Whether the attempts at puking are literal due to his sickness, which is like an ulcer or something. I don't remember the actual detail, but it's something that's really bothering him in the belly, or if it's his conscience. He's
Yeah.
almost like trying. He's almost like trying to. He cannot even bring himself to truly feel sick by what's happening, um, which I do see as almost as a death of the actual conscience, to be honest. But even though there's no clear answers to whether he's seeing this or not, it made me think of an exhibit that we went to together in Berlin
Mm-hmm.
while we were there. We're basically, for people who don't know, in the German History Museum in Berlin right now, there's an exhibit which I highly recommend for anyone in the area. Go visit, where it's just going backwards in time through German history for 150 years, from 1989 to 1850 ish. And when it gets to the parts about the concentration camps, World War II, the assassination attempt on Hitler, it focuses on the assassination attempt, the failed attempt. And it just says that even if that went successfully, nothing truly would have changed because most of the people had already been killed, most of the damage had already been done. When it gets to that point in the film, it almost feels like he's witnessing what's going to happen. Like it's inevitable that all of this violence will keep going. It could change, it could stop it. They're talking about these new methods of gassing people that are way more efficient. This way you can have like 70,000, 7,000 in a day, whatever. Which again is incredibly disturbing. But it goes ahead and ends up doing, like, all the screams that you hear in the end credits feel like the screams of the people that died right after. You hear the ones that are dying in the present throughout, and then you hear everyone who died after that, which is upsetting to say the least. I think it's like second or third time, like one of very rare times when a movie just finished and I had no desire to just like do anything. Just like I felt similarly after Killers of the Flower Moon. I was just like, I'm spent. I don't have any emotions in me right now. Takes us some time to process, to digest. And the way that I saw it connected to the book is also the fact that it can be seen through that lens, but also the lens that the failure of the Nazis is inevitable in a way. They will not be remembered. I mean, the ones who are remembered, they're not remembered fondly. They're remembered for their crimes, their actions. And it's something that's present throughout the book is this almost immortal, I think you mentioned it as well earlier, just this immortal feeling of like
We
the,
can
the
kill
Third Reich will keep going, yeah. And we're eternal and endless, and it's the right cause, it's a good thing to do. But then that's not what happens. Like this feeling of invincibility and invulnerability is fake. No one has ever successfully done that. No one ever will, even though some are trying right now to achieve such immortality in people's minds. And I almost saw them connected in that way, just the ending of the book where you have to accept that like the horrors that happened, there's no going back, there's no changing that. And you just walk away. Both characters, both protagonists, if you want to see Thompson as the protagonist of the book, even though, like you said, of course, he's not the sole one, but both of them at the end have to walk away, um, unable to do anything about what's happened because it's too late almost. I don't know. Um, I did read some. I'm curious about another reading that I read a lot before watching the movie, which was that through the actual documentary footage of the Auschwitz Memorial, Glazer is almost putting these workers or us as the audience in the same shoes as the host family, where you just like accept it as normal. I'm just,
just
you know,
cleaning. Yeah.
I'm just cleaning the furnace, just the ovens. I'm just polishing this glass full of shoes.
Yes. Yes. That reading is something that I completely agree with.
Mhm.
More that one than the connection to the book. Mostly because I think if it was like that, um, I don't think we would see the remains of the destruction, because you are presented with the shoes, you're presented with
Mm.
clutches, the furnaces, the chambers. You're presented with the aftermath of it, the whole destruction of it. So I think it's an interesting way to look at it. But I think this last one, it's very much on point. Is like the apathy of it all. We need to move on, not in an historic way, but even like in a, I don't know, a psychological way of looking at it. We can't focus on the evil of every different thing that happened, or our mind would actually explode. So it's like a way of pointing out how.
Just coping.
Yeah, but it comes with a criticism as well. I don't think it's looking at us, human beings, as a society, as like completely innocent
Mhm.
in all this. We all have a part in this, and I think Glazer is very much. Again, we've during the film, during the Zone of Interest, we are almost every single time not only seeing people being very apathic to everything that's happening around them, but we are also sitting on the corner of of every room, just looking at it. Yeah, so what I said when we started talking about the film, the way it's shot, like very waist level, it feels like you are sat there just looking at it. And in the ending, it puts you back in that chair. You're just in a different room. You're still in a chair, just, and those people are just cleaning up the remains of what were millions of lives. And it's just a day job. And at the end of the day, they go back to their families and have their life and all that, as we all do. We know that capitalism is pretty much destroying everything around us, and we still work for big companies because we need to live. It's a contradiction of life. And I don't think I think Glazer is making criticism to it, but not in like on his high horse. It's just
Hmm.
putting us like in the sense that we do this every day to survive, but it doesn't make us innocent.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In a way, it can be taken even further if we wanted, of just like we were talking about the rise. I mean, the rise. It's here.
It's not
It's
the
not rising. It's the return.
it's the return, yeah.
Somehow Nazis have returned.
It's
Um,
yeah, it's the Empire Strikes Back.
yes, truly, yeah. And it can be seen even as just the way that by putting everything behind glass shells and not
And the
hiding.
musifying of it. I know a lot of people that are very much against the display of these things,
Mm-hmm.
turning these things into tourists. And we have been presented so many times about stupid tourists going, especially to Auschwitz, but not only Birkenau as well. But a lot of concentration camps just taking selfies and doing tour. That also adds up to that. I think there's a lot of arguments towards the way that we should visit these places. We've said it before. We cannot forget and all that. But then there's also the other side of it where we transform this into a destination. We transform this into something that needs cleaning to be presented.
And it's not real anymore.
Yes.
Like it's something you read about. Like even thinking about it at this point, I don't know the stats. Someone probably has a list, but I think we have fewer and fewer survivors from
Yes.
concentration camps alive anymore.
And it shows.
It shows. I think I remember we met some of them when I was growing up. Especially the last one was like in second to last year of high school. It was one of the oldest survivors in Italy. Um, they are part of the past that doesn't feel present anymore, that doesn't feel relevant, even though in a very very sick way. Like you just think back, and it's not that far off in the past.
It's not.
Our
We've not
grandparents were
made
young.
exactly. It's not been 100 years.
It's not. It's not. And even if it were, like that's the thing. It's something I remember. I had this conversation with a teacher of economics once who was talking about just the inevitability of history repeating itself. She was very pessimistic about it, in a way that felt excessive back then, because she was
Well,
talking about, of course, from an economic perspective. She was like, you see everything. Like, let's go back to the end of the 19th century. Just look at what was happening then. Look where we are now in 2013, 2014. It's like it's happening again, and we're bound in five couple of years things were gonna get better, and then they're gonna get way worse in like 10 years or so. And then we saw it as well with, the pandemic happening almost 100 years from the
First
flu
World War
epidemic
and the First World War.
and the First World War. And just the return, as you mentioned, of nationalist ideologies, like extremism. Like I don't even know where I'm going with this. Just um, it makes something like the zone of interest important. The zone of interest in both versions for different
Mhm.
reasons. But the film, especially because it should be a cry for not help, but just for understanding, a cry for empathy in a way. And we see that so many times where, they were not real monsters, they were people just like you and
Yeah.
me. I am very
The
much in,
humanizing of the Nazi. Yeah.
yes, which I am in favor of to a point. It goes back to what you were saying. Like, I think Zone of Interest captures it, Glazer captures it, and the cast does it so well because they feel human. They feel like a real family with real family problems, but not in a way where it's justifiable. It's even more damning that
Yeah.
they are able to. to even complain about certain things, to be honest, considering the position they're in and what's happening behind those walls, which is something that we see again nowadays a lot. Um, Even just disturbing images. I remember when the attacks on Gaza started again, more prominently at the end of 2023. I hadn't seen the movie yet, but people drew comparisons to, for instance, pictures of soldiers grabbing clothes and bringing them back to their families from the destroyed homes of people who lost their apartments. Some of them lost their lives. And it's just like little gift. As they say in here, it's like, ah, it comes from Canada, which was the not the country, but the storage where they kept all the clothes of people who died, who were gassed. It's eerie. It's eerie. Even if this movie, I don't know if it's a movie that could have come out 10 years ago. Maybe would it have had the same impact? Probably not.
Yeah.
Unfortunate coincidence, unlucky coincidence, but also, yeah, it just depresses me. And this is kind of my final statement, to be honest, that it can be, um, to be almost militarized, weaponized, sorry, weaponized in such a way that people who want to champion peace and humanity are the first ones who then condone violence, condone genocides, just because it's, I don't know, it's easier to believe certain lies. And then giving 5 stars to sort of interest.
God, yeah, you're just this is bait, and I'm not taking
There's no bait.
it.
There's no bait. Um,
But yeah, um, that I think I think the reactions that we got to the zone of interest and the positions that people have towards the Israel and Palestinian situation, genocide, to use proper words, is very much a portrait of the compartmentalization that we do and the apathy that we are talking about, because it's people that are looking at this film like, wow, the artistry towards this cannot happen again, and all that, and then you go to Instagram and you see them just taking pictures at the Israeli embassy and just shaking hands with Zionists and all that. And
Singing songs promoting hate.
Yes, yes, go to Amsterdam and just tell everyone to kill. They want to kill all the Arabs and stuff like this. These people give 5 stars to the zone of interest because they have no self confidence. They are not self confidence in any way. Um, and I think that that is very much a portrait of the apathy that the film is talking about. Because you can definitely imagine those same people, because and there's actually a thing in the a passage in a book that I really want to find out, and this is me just going through the book, and now I can't find it, but I will tell you anyway. There is a passage in the book where Hoss, not Hoss, the son Dol,
That doll.
yes, he's saying, yeah, we are only doing this because they would probably do this to us, the Jewish people, if we didn't do to them. They tried it in November 1918, and now we are getting back at them. It's kind of it goes a bit like this. So you can imagine that these people in the zone of interest, the film, would feel exactly the same thing towards if they were under the same threat, even living on the outskirts of that concentration camp. If they were under the same kind of threat, even if they were in that same place, they would compartmentalize. They would ignore the fact
Mhm.
that they are doing this to these people because people are doing this to us at the same time. It comes out of a place where you don't feel like every human life has the same value. I think it all goes back to that. We feel that we are more human than some other people, and we we will not grant humanity towards a people, a country, a religion, whatever it is. Um, so yeah, you'll get exactly those reactions that you're talking about. People that are in favor of Russia, if you want to go, if you want to
Mhm.
go, or the invasion of Ukraine, let's put it like that, or against, or toward, or favorable to the to everything that Israel is doing in Palestine. If it's still you would like very much the zone of interest because it talks to you, because it tells you that oh my God, this can be so bad. How can people be this bad? The apathy of it all. Yes, the apathy of it all. That's the thing. You can't ignore this because you don't grant the same humanity to the people in Palestine or Ukraine. They give grants to the people that are dying on the camps. Um, and I think that is very despicable. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's a very bleak the way people look at this film if you compare it to the way that they look into what is actually happening right now in occupied territories.
It is unfortunate that Martin Amis passed away before any of this happened, or well, before any of this got worse. Um, just because it would be interesting to see and hear what he had to say
Yeah.
um, about the state of the world. Regardless, I have one more question then for you before we go into our favorite parts of the book and the film. Ultimately, I know probably where you're leaning, but which version of the zone of interest do you prefer? The
Uh,
book by Martin Amis or Jonathan Glazer's film?
Yeah, I think you know the answer to this. I very much enjoy. I don't think enjoy this. The, I mean, it's enjoyable. It's an enjoyable read because it's very dark, and if you have a dark sense of humor, it does work in that sense. But I will, on this circumstance, I will always just go back to the film because I think as we said, it's a completely different beast. It's a completely different tone. I think it has more things to say. Let's put it like that. Even visually, because it does help to have the
Mm.
visual element. But it does have a bit more to say, or saying in a different way. Let's put it like that. I don't want to like frame the book in a lesser way because it's not a lesser book in any sense. But the film itself, I will sound hyperbolic, and I fear that when we do other episodes on this, on stuff that we are looking at, and I start to talk about films and books that I very much enjoy, I will start to sound very stupid because I call everything a masterpiece. But I do think The Zone of Interest is a one of a kind film, a one of a kind experience. And you talked about one thing that I found very interesting. You said that if this film was made in 2014, maybe it wouldn't have the same reaction. And I completely agree with that. And what I think is that The Zone of Interest is one of those very, very few films and books. It can be a book as well, but this circumstance, in this instance, a film where it's a very big and pointed, realistic look at the moment in time we're living. It's a portrait of the life in 2023 or 2024 and 2025. Um, it's one of the, if the world doesn't go into a nuclear winter, we will look back in 50 years and say, yeah, this film at that moment in time was very, very accurate portrait. And it's not even a current story, let's put it like that. It's a current story, but the film itself is not. About the state of the world and the state of mostly Western society, uh, in like early 21st century. So yeah, the film has a very special, special, special place in my heart.
Beautifully put. I have to second that, to be honest. I will say that rereading the book and just delving deeper into Martin Amis recently has made me way more interested in checking out some of his other works. Especially listening to one interview with him, he was saying how he believes that all of the best books, and in a way his books as well, are best appreciated after multiple reads. um,
Cheeky.
so very cheeky, very cheeky, very witty, kind of
As
like
the
a
book.
classic as the book, just like listening to him speak felt like, which sounds stupid, I know, but just it felt like hearing passages of the book. Um, but yes, no, I will definitely read more of him. But the film was as surprising, in some ways, even more surprising than what I was expecting. One of those rare, speaking of people who give the movie 5 stars, one of those rare 5 stars on first watch in quite some time, to be honest.
And we don't give those away like me.
Nowadays, no, no. I've tried to get more scars with them, even though I did also give 5 stars to the White Ribbon. So maybe I'm getting back in that era. But when a movie is good, a movie is good, and same with the book. But before we close our conversation, then very briefly, is there a passage or quote from the book that particularly spoke to you?
There were many, most of them were in small um, chapters. I will
Mm,
just read a very, very, like, it's short passage, but it's not just a phrase. He's quoting something that he heard, and I think it just resonates a lot with the film. It's with the book itself, which is either you go mad in the first 10 minutes, it is often said, or you get used to it. You could argue that those who get used to it go in fact go mad, and there's another possible outcome. You don't go mad, and you don't get used to it,
nice one.
which messed me up a little bit.
It's one of many great quotes. I have a passage here because I don't even remember where it is exactly because I wrote all of those down the first time I read the book, so I don't remember it actually is. It's a bit longer, but basically it says, "Under National Socialism, you looked in the mirror and saw your soul. You found yourself out. This applied par excellence and a fortiori by many magnitudes to the victims or to those who lived for more than an hour and had time to confront their own reflections." And yet it also applied to everyone else: the malefactors, the collaborators, the witnesses, the conspirators, the outright martyrs, and even the minor obstructors, like me and like Anadol. We all discovered or helplessly revealed who we were, who somebody really was. That was the zone of interest, which is just one of those
This is
passages.
this is a Thompson passage, isn't it?
I believe so, yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Which is one of those passages that, similarly to yours, I always like when you have just
Yeah.
encapsulating the thesis, if you want to say, of the piece. While for the film, I can go first. There's so many scenes that I found very moving, very memorable. Everything with the girl, especially the glowing girl. But one moment is actually one that you mentioned early on in our conversation. We talked about hope. Um, I find the scene with the grandmother spending her first night at the house, her first real night at the house, being feeling sick from the smell, having to close the window and witnessing the fire of the chimneys and what's actually happening. Something that she knew about, but until she actually stepped into the zone of interest, that's when it became real to her. And for those who were already staying there and living there, they just accepted it. And since she's an outsider, she cannot deal with it. She doesn't do anything brave about it. It's not that type of story, it's not that type of character. But the fact that she just like straight up leaves without saying anything to anyone, I was surprised I'd never read about that moment. With so many scenes that were
Yeah.
pointed out by people, I found that to be so surprising and powerful, especially the anger that the daughter has right after, and she takes it out on the Polish servants in the house.
Yeah. Uh, there's three moments in this, and one of them you talked already, and we've talked at length about that moment where it's the whole sequence. It's not that just the grandmother. You go through different rooms in that house, and you see people coping with everything that is happening. The girl doesn't is trying to. It's like somnambule, or just she doesn't want to sleep, or something like that.
Yeah,
The maid is drinking and trying to quiet the baby. Not quite trying to quiet the baby, just dealing with the crying of the baby and just
crying
drinking,
herself.
crying
Jesus.
herself. Yes. The moment when the grandmother just goes to the window and her face goes bright orange, because of the flames from the chamber is a super powerful moment. The other one that I also mentioned is the piano sequence.
Mhm.
You just hear the song that the girl finds in a medallion. She's streaming in the apples through the path that the prisoners will do. And when she gets to the house, she plays the song, and the although the piano is just playing and there's no singing in the film, the lyrics that supposedly should be written in the sheet are appearing on the screen, and so beautiful and hopeful. It's a hopeful song, so you can imagine that that came from a prisoner that was going towards dying, let's put it like that, and he wrote that. It's a very beautiful moments, and of course the ending of the film, I think was very powerful. It's even the uniqueness of it we can talk about, and we could talk at length about the way that the film can be interpreted in that sequence, which is something that I
Truly, yeah.
like because it's a film that it's very on your face in a way. It's very subtle, but at the same time, it isn't. The ending does open up a discussion that we can have. We can interpret in different ways, but the idea of making a person that brought so much suffering be presented, if it's that's what's happening, being presented to the aftermath of, or to the devastation that he brought to the world. Not only the character, but us as well. I think there's a lot to be said about the ending of the Zone of Interest that we can discuss for hours and hours, and we all would get to different conclusions as we did here.
True, yeah.
We have different sort of ways of looking at it. I don't have a definite one, but I like that. This film.
That's the true beauty of a work of art is when you can keep taking
Different things.
different meanings, different interpretations, something different out of it. And especially you've seen it 4 times now, as you said. So, and you're still getting something new and fresh out of it is a true testament to
It was the first time I've
Glazer.
seen it at the house.
Wow.
The other 3 times I watched it in the cinema, and I was fearing that some of the because there's a lot of work on the sound design
Mhm.
that does help a little bit the film itself, and I was a bit afraid that the film would lose a bit of impact being seen in house. But why was I wrong? It's just as messed up, just maybe not so loud. I guess.
It's quite. On that note, this is the end of our conversation on the zone of interest. Thank you so much for being here, Rafael. Where can our listeners find you and your writing?
So I am on Letterbox as most annoying film people. And RJR Felix. I also write in Portuguese on feucontutor.com.pt. You can always use Google Translate, as my good friend Nico does.
It works, it works.
It does sound a bit shadier, but it's still manageable. If
It
you
reads very smart. It reads very smart.
it doesn't read smart in Portuguese. Even though I think it would. Um, but yeah, and I hope you'll be able to find me in future episodes of this beautiful podcast.
Oh, thank you. We're already planning some good things, so stay tuned. You can find me on Blue Sky and Instagram at Nikigran97. Also on Letterboxd, just search for Nicolo Grasso and you'll find me there. You can follow this podcast on Anatomy of Adaptation Pod on Instagram, just to stay up to date with all of the upcoming episodes. But now I actually want to try and tease things because we have a semblance of a schedule. So stay tuned because the next episode is going to be about Stephen King's Salem's Lot. It's a big read, a lot of viewing materials. We're talking about 2 TV movies, 1 feature film, 1 sequel, and 1 TV show. But it's going to be a fun conversation. So stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you have a fabulous day. Goodbye.